I had a weird upbringing, which some would say created a weird person. How dare you laugh at that? How dare you laugh at that? I had a weird upbringing, and there's myriad reasons for this, but one of them I want to point out to you today is contributed to the fact that I grew up with two different cultures and with two different backgrounds. I grew up in the tension and pulled by two different cultures and two different backgrounds. And I'll unpack this. My family is all from New York. That's how you say it, all. They're all from New York. On my mother's side, they're from New York City, and they moved in a little north of the city. On my father's side, they're all from Long Island, and that's how you say it the correct way, Long Island. So I grew up in you clap it. You from Long Island? Hey, all right, welcome, all right. I get you, man, I get you. And so I grew up in a New York household and a New York culture. So we talked a little differently. Like that, that's right. I got shouted down on that. You say words like talk, and everything has a nice round sound. That gorgeous, warm, aromatic drink you drink first thing in the morning, that's a cup of what? Coffee. Thank you, and for you Atlanteans, thank you for impersonating us in a good way. Coffee, yes. And and when you're not talking, you're chit-chatting, right? You chit-chat, you have a chat. I also learned words that I didn't know were actually words growing up, and it turns out they're Yiddish, but my family would say, like, if someone was teasing you, they were a scutch, and if they were annoying you, they gave you ajita. And I would use this language in my life, and you'll see how it's bitten me over the years. So we talked a little bit differently, and my grandparents, all of them had very thick accents, and all my aunties and uncles, when we'd have family gatherings, had the same. What's more, my sports allegiance and affiliation is all New York, baby. So thank you for that too. Thank you for that, all two of us in the room. So I always had Giants gear. New York Giants is my football team. Even growing up, I'm that kid in the middle. You don't want him at Mike linebacker. Look at that. It's feisty. And I've never not had a Yankee hat. I've always rocked Yankee hats. Interesting, we don't have as avid Braves fans. I got booed first service for that, so thank you. Do we have any Yankee fans in the room? Yeah, a couple? Okay, yeah, all three of us. Okay. So those were my sports affiliations. What's more, lastly, food was a little bit different. When my family would gather together and all the family would come in from New York, what you put out are cold cuts. Now some people go, what? What's that? What is that even? What are you saying? It's cold cuts, but you say it fast, cold cuts. And it's basically like sandwich meat. But you put it out with chips and soda, you're nodding because you get it, right? So this was how I was raised, in a New York home and culture. But everyone makes the assumption I grew up in New York. I did not. I grew up, as I say, like the prophet Daniel, in exile. Not exile. I grew up in a magical little corner of existence called Northwest Arkansas. And now, yeah, I know. And I grew up there because Walmart International headquarters is there for who knows why. But, no, I love Arkansas. Shout out to Arkansas. But it was, where I grew up, it was a place called Bentonville. It wasn't that different from Marietta. However, in high school, I went to public school for the first time, and where our house was, it was zoned for not the more like suburban or even like kind of city side of things. It was rural. Like real rural, like very country. And so it was shell shock, culture shock, first day of school. And so in terms of like the words used, I'm saying certain things and like, you talk funny. And they would say things and they'd be like, it's up on the roof. I'd be like, the what? The roof. I'd be like, are you saying roof? And like, yeah, the roof. Or I grew up saying you guys, and then everyone else in Arkansas says y'all. Yeah, you get it, y'all. So I never talked like that. I was just like, you guys, like, we're girls. I'm like, sorry, that's just a general term. Sorry. And even my basketball coach, he wouldn't wash our jerseys. He would wash our jerseys. I'm like, you checked, right? There's no R in wash. And listen, let me say. If you're in the room and you speak like that, I am not judging you, nor am I saying you're wrong. But you are incorrect. It's just grammar, don't get mad at me, okay? What's more, food was different. If I said cold cuts, they're like, what you talking about? And so the way I spoke was so different at times, and I didn't want to adopt their way of speaking necessarily, again, not because it was wrong, but a guy even asked me one time if I was from Australia. So to mess with him, every once in a while, I'd sneak in some Australian accent. I'd be like, good day, mate. Wonder what they're serving in the cafeteria for lunch. And he'd be like, are you sure you're not Australian? I'd be like, no, sir, I'm not. Why? Why would you ask that? Just to mess with his head, okay? So it was a different culture and a different society, and it was just, there was that pull my entire life in trying to figure out who I am. And this has continued on into adulthood, this kind of pull. Because I currently live in a home with two competing allegiances and two competing influences. But it's in terms of something lighthearted, sports. So many of you get this. When I moved here, I noticed there's a lot of license plates that look like this. House divided, right? Auburn, Alabama, Georgia, Georgia Tech. I got a friend who's got a Georgia, Georgia Tech set of kids. Anyone in here, just out of curiosity, show of hands, anyone have a house divided type situation? No? You do? You do? How do you decide which one to go with? Favorite kid, right? No, I'm just kidding. That's wrong. That's wrong. I'm just kidding. So I live in a house divided like this. I, as we've established in this canon already, put on for the New York Football Giants. That's right. I feel good about a first-round draft pick, by the way, but no one cares. Now, I put on for the Giants. My wife, however, Brooke, is an avid Packer fan. Well, she's a nominal Packer. You know what? She somewhat likes the Packers, okay? She rocks with the Packers, but her family is all in. They love the Green Bay Packers. Their fandom eclipses mine. They are way more devout to them. And in fact, my father-in-law has a condo in Green Bay next to Lambeau Field. And so he makes a pilgrimage to the Holy Land every fall, and that's his thing. And so, as we live in this house divided with the divided allegiances and influences, we had this auspicious opportunity in 2022 to go to a game in London, England, and we got to see the Packers play the Giants. It was awesome, it was epic, but we were a house divided. Of course, me and Boo Boo, me and Brooke, we're like taking pictures. Oh, I'm in my Giants gear, she's in her Packer gear, whatever. And it was all fine, it was all good, but then at the end of the game, so at the end of the game, this is when A-Rod was still on the team, Aaron Rodgers. He rolls out, last play of the game, throws it into the back of the end zone, and if the guy catches it, game over, Packers win. New York Giants cornerback jumps up, knocks the ball down. Giants win, and now watch closely this 15-second video clip of how I responded. All right, let's go to the tape. Again, my face was, by the way, if I pass, I want this picture above my coffin at my funeral, okay? Let's make that happen. Now, let's see my in-laws. Oh, we got a sullen face, we got looking down in shame, we got arms crossed incredulously and in anger. And again, I was having a great time. And so there's two competing allegiances, two competing influences, and my daughter has to grow up in this. As a matter of fact, my 3-year-old daughter, Ruth, has a New York Giants cheerleading outfit and a Green Bay Packer jersey. And so when we're watching Giants games, she wears one, Packer games the other. And also, I don't want to rub it in, but the Giants beat the Packers this last season too. For whoever's keeping score, which is me. Now, why do I tell you all this? Well, because as we get into chapter 2 of Colossians, we're going to see how the Colossians, this group of people the Apostle Paul is writing to, they also exist and are pulled by two different cultures and two different backgrounds. They too have two competing allegiances and two competing influences always and ever in their lives. And we're going to see that bear out in our text today as we're in chapter 2. And what we're going to see is Paul's writing to them to help them, hear this, establish a firm foundation of faith. Establish a firm foundation of faith as they are pulled in two different directions. Now, let me give you a little context of the letter. The Apostle Paul, as I mentioned, is writing from prison to this group of people in a place called Colossae, and these people are called the Colossians. He's writing alongside co-authoring with his Padawan learner, his apprentice, Timothy, aka Himothy. If you were here 2 weeks ago, you get it. And he's writing to his this group of people, and they're in this place called Colossae. There's a guy named Epaphras who's helped building up the church, like the Big C church there. But there's these little groups and pockets and houses of people popping up, followers of Jesus, and these little groups of people are called ecclesias as they gather together, and the gospel is breaking in and breaking out, and these ecclesias, again, are I feel good about that sound effect. They're popping up all over the place. And so that's to whom Paul is writing. But let me give you some context of Colossae. Like, whoa. What was this place like? Well, as I established 2 weeks ago and I showed you on the map, Colossae is in modern day Turkey. It was Asia Minor at the time, and it's part of this kind of triangle of cities of Colossae, Hierapolis, and Laodicea, which is mentioned in chapter 2. And it's probably the more rural, like where I went to high school, of the three. So if by analogy, if you've heard of like the Research Triangle in North Carolina, it's kind of similar. It's this kind of triad of cities. Now, what you need to know about this triad of cities is because this river ran through called the Lycus River, it was a very fertile place. And so it was a resource-rich land. It became a thriving textile economy, and it became this centralized trade hub connecting the Mediterranean to the rest of Asia. And because of this, it drew people like crazy to this place. Like everyone started flocking to Colossae because of what was going on. And this made it a diverse place and a diverse population. Let me demonstrate. So you had in Colossae what I would refer to as indigenous Colossians. People who had been there for generations and generations and generations and generations in Asia Minor in Colossae, or at least that area. But we know from historians like Josephus and Philo that there was a huge, given a myriad of circumstances, there was an influx of Jewish population. Some historians even surmise around like 7,500 to 8,000 Jewish people in Colossae because they had to flee there in the diaspora centuries before. So there's a Jewish contingency. There's a lot of Jewish people. Hear that? Remember that. Hold on to that. There are also, because of the booming trade and textiles and everything else, a lot of Greco-Roman people living and existing in the Roman Empire of the day from all corners of the empire coming to Colossae because there's work and there's resource and there's money to be made. What's more, because of its strategic trade location, there was a lot of Roman military presence and Roman roads going through Colossae. So there's Roman soldiers and military and government there too. So here the diversity of people, indigenous Colossians, Jewish people who had migrated there / fled there, Greco-Roman people there for work, and then Romans there trying to kind of do their job and hold it down. So this is Colossae. This is what was going on. This is to whom Paul is writing. And I want to talk to you today about the problem of the pull, the problem of the pull. And to do this, as I explain this, I'm going to invite my friend Stephen up, and I'm going to invite my friend Tony up. Excuse me. So let's give it up for him. Let's give it up. Stephen and Tony, let's give it up for them. They're gonna help me with this. And if this setup looks ridiculous, it's mostly because it is. All right, so here we go. Looks like an umbilical cord, sorry. Here we go. Where's my other? There's another hook around here somewhere, guys. It'll show up. All right, so here's the problem of the pull. As I alluded to earlier, the Colossians were between two different cultures in two different backgrounds. They were between two different allegiances and two different, you guys done pulled it right off. All right, we're gonna improv like we did first service. Amazon's gonna get a scathing review from me. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, so they're pulled between these two different contexts, these two different cultures. And so let's talk about this. If they're trying to faithfully follow Jesus and they're trying to be firm in their faith as they're fledgling followers of Jesus, as they're newbies in their faith, it's gonna be hard to do that with being pulled in two different directions. They're like, oh, I'm gonna go over here. Wait, no, I'm getting pulled over here. Wait, I'm pulled over where? Hold up, wait, what? And they're being pulled back and forth. It's jarring, it's exhausting, and it's confusing. This is the problem of the pull. So let me unpack what each of these pulls, what each of these cultures and backgrounds and influences and allegiances were. So let's talk about the pagan culture, background, allegiance, and influence. In Colossae, let's talk about these indigenous Colossians. They actually worshipped this Lycus River that ran through the land. Lycus in Greek means wolf, and they worshipped this like wolf river deity. So by analogy, it'd be like you worshiping the Chattahoochee River, right? Oh, Chattahoochee, thank you for the weekends of fun as we shoot the hooch, whatever. Which, by the way, if someone's new to Georgia, don't ask them if they want to shoot the hooch. None of us know what you're talking about. Explain it first, okay? Thank you. That's a public service announcement. Now, Lycus River, they would worship this as a deity. What's more, they would worship this Mother Earth goddess named Gaia. who they believed controlled all the elements and controlled nature, and they would worship her. This was the OG religion, right? This was maybe what their family and ancestors held to. But because the influx of Greco-Roman people, they also were influenced to worship the Greco-Roman pantheon. And specifically, yes, Apollo, yes, Zeus, but specifically this goddess Artemis that archaeologists have found and excavated coins of, her likeness on coins in this area. And in fact, her temple, the temple of Artemis, was located in Ephesus, which was only like 120 miles away. It was one of the seventh wonders of the world. So there was a pocket and a strong contingency and a strong influence of Greco-Roman worship. So that's not the only one though. So we have another tension, we have another something pulling at them, which is Greco-Roman philosophy and worldview. The Greco-Romans held to the philosophy of Plato and Aristotle, of this Roman poet, historian, and philosopher named Seneca, of these new groups called proto-Gnostics that were proposing different ways to view the world and like, no, don't forget about deities. Oh, what about you? And there's all this influence and confluence of influence, and there was this pull. So as they're trying to faithfully follow Jesus, there's all these things pulling against them. Make it tight, pull it tight, pull it tight. There we go. They're trying to follow Jesus, and there's this pull of like, wait, no. What about your indigenous religion? Wait. No, what about the pantheon? Hold on. What about all this philosophy? Yeah, like you still hold to like an actual religion? Like who does that? And it was creating, let's say, tension. Yeah, you rip my pants right off. Looney Tunes style. So it created tension as they're faithfully trying to follow Jesus. And so Paul writes into this tension. Check this out. I love this. Okay, watch what Paul says. He says, I say this in order, now this here is encouragement. He's encouraging them. We'll get to this later. He's encouraging them, I say this in order that no one may delude you with plausible arguments. See to it that no one takes you captive by philosophy and empty deceit according to human tradition, like worshiping the river god or Gaia, according to the elemental spirits of this world that they thought Gaia controlled, not according to the Messiah. Now, I want to circle back to verse 4 and look at this word delude. I was unpacking it this week, and I love the word Paul uses and the word picture that Paul uses here. It's actually paralagizomai. Paralagizomai. I'd have you repeat it, but I can barely say it. So we're just going to move past it. Paralagizomai, and it means to reason contrary to truth in a misleading or erroneous way. Now, let me unpack kind of in Greek what this means. This is amazing. I love that Paul uses this word. Para means alongside. And logos, which is in that word, means logic, reason, or truth. It literally means alongside truth. It's truth adjacent. It's seemingly true, but not quite true. Like the saying, like God helps those that help themselves. That's not actually in the Bible. That seems like it would be something in the Bible, but it's actually adjacent. It's not quite truth. It's apart from truth. So by analogy, let me talk about knockoffs and off-brand cereal. It'll make sense, okay? Hopefully it makes sense. So some of you perhaps in the past have gone to buy something. Let's just say it was like a Prada bag. And you're like, man, this is real cheap. Okay, let me go ahead and get that. And then you get it and it's a Prada bag. And the zipper already fell off in the mail. And you're like, oh man, come on. That's a knockoff. What's more, we were having a talk the other day, and we were talking about fake J's, so fake Jordans. People try to buy Jordans online, and my man's holding a tray of food while he's dunking. That's super impressive. Also, he's wearing cargo pants, apparently. So that's not accurate, right? That's paralagizomai. It's similar, but it's kind of Jordan adjacent, but it's not actual Jordan. They're not J's. What's more, growing up, when you walk down the cereal aisle, there's two different rows you look at. There's the top shelf of like Fruit Loops, Lucky Charms, and Cinnamon Toast Crunch, the GOAT. Then you look down, and there's the giant mulch bags of cereal. We got like Fruity-O's, Lucky Puffs, and Sin Squares. And so I always told people, like, growing up, you're either in a budgetary state where you would like buy cereal, or you would buy cereal. The big concrete bags, you know what I'm saying? But when you got home, you'd get home with your Fruity-O's or your Lucky Puffs or your Sin Squares, and you would go to eat them, and you're like, oh, they aren't Fruit Loops, they're the Fruity-O's. It's like they're Fruit Loop adjacent. Like they're not quite, they're seemingly Fruit Loops, but they're not. They're paralagizomai. And so Paul is saying, hey, don't fall. He literally says, don't be taken captive by what is paralogizomai. These religions may seem true, it may seem right, but it's not. It's just seemingly so don't be fooled. So that's one pull. They're trying to follow Jesus. Pull it tight, right? Mush, right? So I'm trying to follow Jesus, and there's all this pull from the pagan roots and influence. But let's talk about the other side, the Jewish culture, background, allegiance, and influence. Now, I love the Jewish roots of the faith. I study the Jewish roots of the faith. I have a relationship with and I'm in community with a Messianic Jewish congregation. I teach there sometimes. The rabbi there, Rabbi Kevin, is one of my mentors. He teaches that Jesus is the Messiah to Jewish people. So I'm in, right? I observe a lot of the festivals and the holidays, which we'll talk about. But here's the thing. None of the stuff I'm getting ready to unpack is bad. It gets problematic in terms of the culture and relationships in the ecclesia, in these fledgling churches. So, first thing to point out here, there was this Gentile initiation issue. Now, the first of these applied to men only, but to become Jewish in this day, and some things have changed over time, there was 3 rites of initiation. 1, circumcision. Oof. I had a lot of jokes here, but I cut them, no pun intended. I didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean to do that. But that's gonna be, if you're saying you had to be circumcised in order to follow Jesus, you're like, wait, what? And I'll get at kind of the delivery here in a minute. So that is a barrier of entrance, because if you're wanting to follow Jesus and you're like 40 years old and you're like, I have to get what? And yet some of you won't even go to welcome home, okay? How dare you? So that was a barrier of entrance. That was 1, circumcision. 2 was baptism. This is where it was an all skate. It was men and women. And in fact, their form of baptism was called mikvah. And so even this happens today. If you want to convert to Judaism, you get mikvahd, which is like if you were here for the hunger night of worship and baptism, it's like a tub, and rather than sitting down and getting dunked, you go, I'm all set, I'm gonna dunk myself. And you go into the water and out of the water. So apparently you're sprinting in. I don't know why I did that. So you kind of baptize yourself. So that was the second thing, a rite of initiation. Thirdly, you would make a sacrifice in the temple to atone for your sins and to pay your debt of transgression and guilt so that you could become Jewish, okay? But here, see, the relational delivery. So if I'm a Colossian and I'm trying to faithfully follow Jesus, I want to be about that life. I want to follow Jesus. I want to be rooted in him. I want to establish a firm foundation in him. Some of the Jewish, not all, but some of the Jewish members of the ecclesia in Colossae were going like, well, I mean, if you really want to follow Jesus, you would become Jewish. Because like the roots of the faith are in Judaism and like Jesus was Jewish. So like, why would you not become Jewish? Like, no offense, but like, are you a real follower of Jesus? Like that tone and that pitch. Like, are you really about Jesus? I don't know. I think you should, the rites and rituals. There was a pile on to this in terms of Gentile obligation. Now let me unpack this. So in terms of Gentile obligations, Jewish people had yearly, monthly, weekly, and daily rituals. Yearly, they celebrated what's called the Hagim and the Moedim, the feasts and the festivals. You all know about this. Passover, right? Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, Sukkot, Shavuot, Purim, all these Jewish holidays. They were made, Rosh Hashanah, they were from the Old Testament, and they followed these and held to these on the calendar and observed these. What's more, monthly, they celebrated what was called the Rosh Chodesh, the head of the month, and it was a special worship service and time of prayer. Weekly, they observed the Sabbath from sundown on Friday to sundown on Saturday in a very particular way that involved food and drink and diet, a kosher diet. And they were about these. They believed that this marked you as a Jewish person and these were important. And again, they were foisting these obligations. These Jewish followers of Jesus were foisting these on Gentiles. So again, it's like, I mean, you don't celebrate the yearly, weekly, monthly. Like, are you a follower of Jesus though? Like, I don't know. And so imagine if you're a Gentile and you're trying to follow Jesus. You're like, I want to follow Jesus. Wait, there's this other stuff I'm supposed to do? Wait, I feel like you're like creating a barrier of entry for like other people. Wait, I feel like this is kind of heavy or like this is pulling. Wait, I feel like I'm kind of being judged here and I feel kind of guilty. It's creating tension. And so Paul speaks into this tension, and does he ever? Watch this, he covers all the bases. He says this in 2:11, in him, Jesus, also you were circumcised with a circumcision made without hands by putting off the body of the flesh, by the circumcision of the Messiah, talking about circumcision, having been buried with him in baptism, in which you were raised with him through faith in the powerful working of God who raised him from the dead. And you who were dead in your trespasses and the uncircumcision of your flesh, God made alive together with him, for having forgiven all of our trespasses. what Paul brilliantly does is he speaks into the circumcision, baptism, and sacrifice issue, and he goes, Jesus has covered all of it. You have a new circumcision as you are in Jesus and with Jesus. Language Paul will use throughout the letter. Hey, you have been baptized, and you are raised to new life. And you know what? Why are you making a sacrifice in the temple? Jesus has already become the ultimate sacrifice to atone your sin and to alleviate your debt of guilt. And so you can walk in that freedom. But Paul, amen indeed. But Paul ain't done yet. He speaks into the other issue. He says this, therefore let no one pass judgment on you in questions of food and drink, or in regard to a festival like the Chagim and Moedim, or a new moon like the Rosh Chodesh, or the Sabbath, the Shabbat. He's saying don't let people judge you because of that. So as the Colossians are trying to faithfully follow Jesus, hey, and they're feeling this pull, hey, man, that's heavy, that's judgy, that's whatever. Paul's like, don't do that. No. Jesus has covered all of that for you. He has done that for you. Walk in the freedom, and this is his encouragement. Ready for this? This is where we're going to bring it home and then flip it and apply it to ourselves. He says he wants them to establish a firm foundation of faith. And so let me unpack this word faith, because Paul opens up and he says this, for though I am absent in the body, yet I am with you in spirit, rejoicing to see your order and firmness of your faith. So as the Colossians are pulled in both directions, he's applauding them because they're trying their best to stay strong, to stay centered, and stay established in their faith. Now I want to unpack this word faith and what that means. The word used here and throughout the New Testament is the word pistis. And pistis has kind of a trifold meaning. One, it means believe without seeing, of course. It's like faith in that kind of way. It's like, even though I haven't seen this, I've heard reports, I know there's eyewitness accounts of Jesus, I've seen fruit that people are bearing. Yes, okay, I believe in, even though I don't see. But here's the problem. You can have that kind of pistis in Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny. The thing that has to follow that kind of pistis is allegiance, like we talked about earlier with the sports in my house. It's bearing down and doubling down on what you believe. Yes, I'm gonna be allegiant to it, I'm gonna be devoted to it, but then lastly, over time, I'm gonna be faithful to it. And actually with intensity, I'm gonna be faithful to it. So it's this kind of threefold faith of, believe without seeing, but also have allegiance and devotion and hold to it in faithfulness. And the reason, why do they need to hold to it? Because they're being pulled in both directions. Be faithful to it. And so then Paul hits him with a haymaker of encouragement. And I love this, and this is gonna be our encouragement later. He says, therefore, as you receive Jesus Christ the Lord, so walk in him, this active faith. And then he says this, be rooted and built up in him and established in faith, like we talked about faith, just as you were taught, abounding in thanksgiving. Here's what I love. All of the verbs that Paul uses here, ready for some nerdery, some Greek nerdery. Let's push our glasses up and get ready for this nerdery. They're all written in what's called the present participial tense, which all that means is it's active like it's happening right now. Running, jumping, swimming, hiking, it's all active kinetic energy. And so what Paul encourages them in is he said, hey, as you're walking with Jesus, you are, and I want you to continue in this, as you're being rooted. It's active, it's kinetic. And the word picture to this is a tree putting down roots. And if you've seen these kind of pictures of trees, you know that as a tree, here it stays faithfully in one place for one time. Over time, the roots grow deep. And as these are fledgling followers of Jesus, as they're new to the game, they're newbies, they're rookies, they need to stay put and put down deep roots that go both deep in terms of their devotion and allegiance, but also wide in terms of their faithfulness over time. See how that works? And so if they're being pulled in two different directions, Paul's saying, don't go one way or the other. Stay planted, stay rooted, let the roots grow deep. That's what's going to be most healthy, and that's going to be true in your life as well, but we'll get to that. But then Paul also uses this present participial verb, this active kinetic tense of being built up. Actively being built up. Continue in that. I want you guys to continue being built up. And the word picture here, and the verb used here, is from construction. It's a building term. So what Paul wants, as we've said so many times, is he wants them to have this firm foundation that is built upon. And so just like a foundation of a building or a house, you have to have a firm foundation. Otherwise, the building's gonna sink. Otherwise, the building's gonna fall in on itself. Otherwise, the building is gonna be swayed to the left and to the right and could topple over. If the building of your house, or the foundation of your house is messed up, you know you're hosed. You gotta fix that or else. And so Paul is saying, continue being built up with a firm foundation, a solid foundation. And then I love this one. It's a different translation probably in your Bible, but he says, being confirmed. Now, the verb here, as I was unpacking it, it gets at a word picture of like a legal document or like a notary stamp. So think of like a marriage license. So if I do your wedding, if I officiate your wedding, not only am I gonna turn up on the dance floor afterwards, you can be assured of that, but you can also take confidence and be confirmed that not only dancing, I'm gonna take the marriage license, sign it, seal it, bop it, twist it, send it off into the mail, and you don't have to worry about it. You are married. Are we married? You are married. I took care of it, it's done, it's a binding deal, you're good, you don't have to sweat it. And so, I love this because Paul's saying be confirmed in your faith in Jesus, because there was a pull from some of the Jewish religious people of like, are you really a Christian though? Are you though? And so this is creating tension and maybe some guilt and heaviness. And Paul's like, no. Be confirmed in who Jesus is, what Jesus has done, and who you are in Jesus. Be confirmed. Stamp it, mail it, it's good. And so in this, we see this great encouragement. And here's where I want to turn it. I want all of us today to likewise establish a firm foundation of faith in Jesus together. But here's the problem. We all experience the problem of the pull. We're pulled in multiple directions. I just talked about two. We're pulled in all different kinds of directions. But let's talk about over here. We have this influence of different religions in the world. And you look out there and you're like, oh, there's a lot of different religions. That kind of gets confusing and overwhelming. There's a lot of different worldviews out there. And you see them online. You hear people talk about them. And you're like, oh, that's kind of, I guess that's kind of got me thinking, I want to follow Jesus, but that's interesting. Or some of you even have family traditions and religions that are rooted in something else. And so you're trying to faithfully follow Jesus, and there's tension because you're like, why am I the only one in my family? Why am I the only one in my friend group? Why am I the only one at my work? Why am I the only one in this context or maybe even like this pull creates questions and uncertainty for you. Well, let me be helpful here, or try to be helpful here. There are a lot of religions out there that actually say a lot of things about Jesus. Great teacher, a prophet, et cetera, et cetera. And they'll even purport and they'll say to you, we pretty much believe the same things about Jesus. But I would caution you, it's paralogizomai. It's Jesus adjacent. And so you gotta recognize, you gotta see a knockoff. And you have to be able to taste and observe, that's Fruitios, okay? That's not the real deal Holyfield. And when it comes to before I even say that, I can encourage you with this. Any other of these religions will not hold up in terms of the beauty, the worldview, the consistency, the way you can know truth and the revelation thereof, the way you can live ethically in this world and creating more good. And none of them are true. None of them are rooted. And most of them have not stood the test of time. For example, an illustration, how many people you know, how many people in the room, show of hands, know someone that is an Artemisian, someone who worships Artemis? No? What about the Lycus River? Anyone? No. But the way of Jesus and his church and his ecclesia moves on and rolls on, and they keep popping up all over the world, and has been confirmed through generations. With worldview, I can promise you, no matter what your worldview is or what is thrown at you, and you're like, I can make my own way and be my own compass. I can make my own truth. It's just about validating my needs and being my full and true self. That sounds amazing. Here's the thing. I've seen it time and time again. It will leave you feeling empty, confused, and unfounded. And it will continue to pull you in two different directions. And when you do this, it's exhausting and disorienting. And so beware the problem of the pull. But I want to talk about this other pull over here. Because sometimes there's this pull of religion. And maybe you've been beat over the head with Christian culture. I want to follow Jesus, but okay, so I can't do all this stuff? Like it's got to be like only Christian anything? I can't enjoy or interact with the world at all? What are all these rules? I feel like there's a barrier to entrance. I want to follow Jesus, but like you guys seem like boring, honestly. Or like that seems like really oppressive. Or maybe you've been in church contexts where a bunch of rules were piled onto you that were not biblical, where it was just someone's take or opinion or experience or tradition. And so you're trying to follow Jesus and you're like, oh, geez, that's really heavy. Man, that hurts my back. That's knocking my hip out of joint. I'm trying to fit, I feel like we're majoring in the minors. Or maybe you've been in a church context or a religious context where you were oppressed and judged for stuff that wasn't unbiblical. It was just different than what someone else thought. And that's where Paul says, hey, from this pool, don't be taken captive. And from this pool, don't be judged. Fix your eyes on Jesus. Recognize, wait, hold up, that rule, that's paralogizomai. No, that's not a Jesus thing, but I see how it might sound like it. And so as you're faithfully trying to follow Jesus, don't let these rules and don't let all of this oppression and judgment pull you back from following Jesus. Rather, here's my walk-off encouragement for you guys today. Be rooted. Be rooted like Paul said. And here's what I want to get real specific. Be rooted in the word. The Lord has been faithful and kind to give us his word, this biblical text that we study in NMCU and help you unpack. You got to know the word to know what's parallegizomai. You got to know what J's look like, the J logo, so you know that the bowling J logo that's not real. You got to be able to see that. And in fact, people that study counterfeit money, or like they look for counterfeit money, they don't study all the variations of counterfeits. They study actual money, like what it's supposed to look like. Likewise, we study the word to know what is true and what's parallegizomai, what's truth adjacent. What's more, we look to the word, the living word, the word made flesh, Jesus. And as we faithfully follow Jesus, we'll feel pull from this world and from different teachings, and we'll be like, that kind of sounds true. Wait a minute, as I experience this, I taste and see as I follow Jesus, that's parallegizomai. That's Fruitios. And so you have to be rooted in the word so you are not pulled in either direction. But here's the other thing. My encouragement, be built up. This one's really easy, okay, ready? One of the best ways to do this, look around the room. We're doing it right here. Be involved in a local church to actively, kinetically be built up. And one of the ways we do this in gathering together is that's where we talk about circles all the time around here. We talk about how at North Metro Church, we want you to live in community, to learn biblical truth, and to love God, his church, and others. And this will be transformative for you in establishing and rooting for you. We want you to continue to gather together here on Sundays. We want you to continue to gather weekly, monthly, whatever, in groups to encourage one another. We want you to take NMCU so you can be rooted in Scripture. We want you to not get your swerve on, but get your serve on within the walls of the church and outside of the walls of the church. And I've seen that have a transforming and a confirming and a faith-building impact on people as they're pulled in different directions. And in fact, a young man at baptism night said one of the things that changed for him is when he went and served in Guatemala. And so I would encourage you to continue being built up. And then lastly, I would say, and I would encourage you to be confirmed, just like Paul told the Colossians. Be confirmed in your faith. And maybe you're here today and you've had a lot of this pull in your life. You're trying to follow Jesus and you're like, oh man, I feel like really judged. I feel less than. I feel like I'm not doing, man, people are just telling me everything that I'm not doing right. And like, I'm trying to faithfully follow Jesus, but there's all this other stuff. And man, there's just a lot of rules and majoring in the minor. Or maybe in terms of gospel truth, you're like, oh, I just need to do more. I got to earn more. Man, I would love if you could just rest in what Jesus has done for you. Like how Jesus went through those initiation rites and the obligations. Yeah, Jesus has done it for you with his sacrifice on the cross. So if you are in Jesus, if you are with Jesus, Colossians language, you are already a follower of Jesus, please rest in that and just faithfully follow Jesus. Walk in it, be rooted in it, be built up in it, and be confirmed in that. But what's more, maybe you're not confirmed in that. Maybe you're here and you're like, Jesus, good guy, good teacher. Not sure if I'm on board. My invitation today would be to faithfully follow Jesus. Maybe you feel the pull of this world. You've had a bad religious experience. Well, my grandma's church was this way, or this one church. Or like, oh, my friends are about this. Man, that's exhausting, disorienting. And what I would say today is maybe you can stop that and actually be established firmly in faith in Jesus. My invitation to you today would just be to take that first step, to turn in repentance, to return to the Lord and accept Jesus' gift of grace and forgiveness procured for you on the cross. Your debt has been paid and you are invited into new life. And lastly, no matter where you're at and what you're doing, I would invite you into what Paul talks about, what we talked about in the host moment and what Paul talks about in chapter 2, baptism. Symbolize this being rooted, this being built up, and this confirmation with baptism. Paul uses this beautiful language of dying to the old self to raise to the new. It's this way of being confirmed into the covenant of Jesus, this way of being confirmed, being in Jesus and with Jesus. And when you go to a baptism night, the stories of life change and transformation are amazing and beautiful. And so if you've never taken that step of baptism, I would invite you into that today. And we have another hunger night of worship coming up, and we do have openings for baptism, and I hope to see you there. Now, can we please, as we end today, give it up for my friends, Tony and Steven. Thank you, fellas. And I would invite you guys to stand as we end today. And I'd love to end by way of benediction, just to bless you and encourage you. So may you today, North Metro Church, may you be rooted in your faith. May we continue to build one another up in love and good deeds as we faithfully follow Jesus. May there be no doubts in your minds. May there be no pull from one direction. May you be confirmed in the gospel that who Jesus is, what Jesus has done, and who you are in Jesus. And may you have a firm foundation. May you walk on a firm foundation, and may you establish a firm foundation of faith today. Grace and peace to you, North Metro Church.